Welcome back to the Dear Monday podcast. I'm TuRhonda Freeman. Last week, I made you a promise. I told you that we were going to stop following one woman and we were going to look at what all three of them share. Something that lives underneath every major ownership decision, regardless of where you're standing when you make it. It's not what you're going to find in the pitch deck. It's not what's in the financial projections or what you'll see at Discovery Day. It's an obligation nobody mentions before you commit. That's where we're going today. But before we get there, let me bring all three women back into the room. We talked about Erin, who was standing at the edge of a franchise commitment. Erin has all the information. She's done the research. She's been learning over the last few episodes to tell the difference between what the process can give her and what she has to find herself. Erin is close. Then we talked about Allison. Allison has been sitting with a much different kind of knowing. She already has her answer. She's been managing this gap between knowing what she needs to do and actually doing it, between a plan that is real and a life she has not yet adjusted to match it. She is ready or close enough that the difference matters. Lastly, we talked about Renee. Renee didn't choose her moment. The ground moved without her permission. She's not starting from scratch, but she is starting from a position she didn't design, carrying pressure she didn't ask for, and trying to make the decision from inside the pressure without letting the pressure make it for her. So we have three women, three different moments, and three questions that feel like from the inside they belong to each of them individually, but they don't. There is something that all of them share. And today is the episode where we name it. Before we do, I want to tell you something personal. I have not learned what I know about these decisions from the outside of them. I've been in every one of these seats, not as a case study, not as an observer, but as a person making these same decisions with my own money, my own time, and my own life at stake. And what I've learned is that the kind of decisions that almost never gets named before the commitment is made. I'm telling you that from experience, all kinds of experience. In Erin's seat, I was the corporate woman with a plan. I had the career, the income, the structure, the stability. And I bought my first franchise location while I was still employed. That was the responsible move. Keep the career, test the commitment. Don't go all in before you know what you're walking into. It was a sensible and measured type of decision. Exactly the kind of decision that looks right from the outside. What I found out, not before the signature, but after it, was what it actually costs to hold both, to be fully in a career and fully in an ownership commitment at the same time. The weight of both of those things running simultaneously. The way each one has its own clock, its own demands, its own version of urgent, and neither one pauses for the other. I learned that year one isn't a projection, it's a reality check. From Allison's seat, I eventually took the leap. It was about 18 months. I left my corporate role. I wanted to go into full-time ownership so that I could scale the business. I had a plan. I had been running the numbers for months, and I knew exactly what I was doing. The plan was right. The direction was right. What I didn't know, what nobody tells you when the plan is solid, is what it feels like to execute the right plan and still be months away from the return it projected. To be doing everything correctly and still be waiting. I'm talking month after month. The plan is working, but the results are coming. And the gap between the plan being right and the plan feeling like relief is longer than I expected. See, I thought I was prepared. I had the numbers, I had the timeline. What I wasn't prepared for was the complexity of the building phase from inside the building phase. That's different from having a plan for it. And I learned that difference after I was already in it. And lastly, from Renee's seat, I, like many of you, have had my world turned upside down by career disruption. That's not a chapter I planned. It arrived the way disruption arrives, without permission, on a timeline that wasn't mine, with consequences I had to navigate whether I was ready to or not. And I remember the pressure of the in between. It is this urgency of wanting an answer, any answer really. The feeling that staying still was the most expensive thing I could do, even when moving might have been more expensive in ways I couldn't see clearly from inside this urgency. I thought disruption was a reset. It wasn't. It was more like a compression. The timeline shortened, but the stakes didn't. I had to learn in real time with real money and with a real life to make decisions inside that pressure without letting the pressure make them for me. So I'm telling you all of this because the thing I want to name today, the obligation nobody mentions, I didn't read about it. I lived it. And what I learned sitting in each of those seats is what this show is built on. So let's talk about what all of these women share. Now, we want to name this. Every process built around a major ownership decision is designed in its architecture to move you forward. Now, that's not a criticism, it is a structural reality. The franchise discovery process exists to move Aaron toward a commitment. It is built to do that. Every step, the validation calls, the discovery day, the broker conversations, it's all designed to take someone who is interested and move them toward a decision. That's not a flaw. It is how the process works. The career transition coaching exists to move Allison out of her corporate role and into her next chapter. The programs, the advisors, the network that activates when she signals that she's ready, all of it is built around the momentum of the move. That is what it is designed to produce. Then the rebuilding programs, the opportunity pipelines, the professional community that rally around Renee after disruption, they exist to move her toward the next thing, to help her get out of the in between and into something forward. And nobody in those rooms is paid to slow the process down. Nobody's job is to surface the full weight of the commitment that you are about to make. Now, that's not a conspiracy. Nobody is hiding anything. The broker isn't withholding. The coach isn't deceiving. And I believe the community is genuinely trying to help. But the structure of every one of those processes creates a blind spot. And if you're in one of those processes right now, you're inside that blind spot, whether you realize it or not. Here's what lives in it. The obligation is what the decision will continue to require of you in time, in structure, in capacity, after you've committed and before the return arrives. Not at the signing, not on discovery day, not even in the first week of the new chapter, but in every month after that, for as long as the commitment is real. If you're getting into a franchise, the FDD names what you're buying. It does not name what the ownership will ask of your life. The career transition plan names the income gap. It does not name what the building phase asks of your identity, your relationships, or your sense of forward motion when the plan is right, but the results are still trickling in. The rebuilding strategy names the next opportunity. It does not name what the urgency of the in between cost of the decision that you make to get out of it. This is the category that almost never gets examined independently before the commitment is made. And this is the gap that Dear Monday's work fills. Not franchise advisory. The work that examines what this decision will require of your life before you commit to it. That's the category. This episode is the one that not only names it, but walks you through it entirely. So, how it shows up for each woman. Let's talk about that. I want to be specific here because the obligation shows up differently depending on where you're standing, right? It's same category, different position. For Erin is looking at a franchise opportunity. The financial obligation is documented. She's read the FDD. She knows the investment number, the royalty structure, the initial working capital requirement. She has done the math. What isn't in the document is the operational weight of year one, not the projection of year one, the reality of it. 12 months of building a functional business while the infrastructure is still stabilizing, while the systems are still settling, while the team is still forming, and while she is simultaneously learning the business and running it. That weight has a clock. And let me tell you, it runs every day, regardless of what else is happening in your life. And the people around Erin, the ones who said yes when she bought in, who supported this decision, who were proud of her for making it, they didn't fully know what they were agreeing to either. Not because she failed to inform them, but because no one told her what it would actually look like from the inside of a heart month. The question she needs to be able to answer before she signs is, who in my life knows what this will ask of them? And have they actually agreed to it? If she signs without that alignment, the conversation doesn't happen before the commitment. She will discover the gap during year one when changing it is significantly harder than exploring it was. After the structure of her life has already been built around this obligation, after the space she had to adjust is already gone. Now, for Allison, who's exiting a career, Allison has been more prepared than most people ever are. The financial plan is real. The income gap is mapped. And she's been running the numbers and building the picture, making sure the plan holds before she moves. Allison is smart. She has done the work. But the plan doesn't capture the pace of the building phase. We're not talking a bad month, not a setback. We're talking the accumulation of months where everything is going according to plan and the return is still arriving. Month after month, executing correctly, waiting for the math to catch up to the effort. That experience is different from having a plan for it. You can plan for a difficult year. You cannot fully prepare for what it feels like to live inside it month after month before the return comes. And underneath that We've talked about the identity cost. She has been someone with a title, an institution, an organization. There is a structure that organizes how she moved through the world, how she introduced herself, how she was recognized inside the rooms that mattered to her career. What she is building is real and it is worth building, but it does not come with that structure on day one. And the gap between who she was and who she's becoming, that transition has a duration. It lasts longer than the financial plan acknowledges. The question that she needs to be able to answer before she leaves: have I accounted for what the building phase asks of me? Not financially, but in every other way that matters. If Allison underestimates the identity cost, I think she'll find it in 6 months when the plan is working and something still feels wrong. And that confusion is expensive. And it was there to examine before she left. For Renee, the next opportunity for Renee is real. The plan she's building is sound, or it will be. What isn't fully named is what the in between is doing to the quality of the decision she's about to make. And specifically, how long this in between stretches. Because disruption, we all know, doesn't pause the financial clock, right? The bills arrive on the same schedule as they always did. The timeline to replace what was lost is real. And the urgency of wanting to stop being in this in between, that urgency is real. It's not a weakness, it is a rational response to a real pressure. That urgency accumulates. Week by week, it builds. And at a certain point, the urgency stops being a fact she is working with and starts being a driver of the decision she is about to make. The commitment starts to get sized around getting out of the in between rather than getting into the right thing. The obligation nobody names to Renee is this: the cost of getting the next decision wrong from the disrupted position is higher than the cost of getting it wrong from a stable one. Not because she's less capable, but because she has less room to absorb a mistake. The margin is smaller. The correction is much more expensive. And the process around her is still designed to move her forward. The question Renee needs to be able to answer before she commits: am I making this decision at the pace the opportunity requires, or at the pace the in between demands? If the urgency of the in between sets the standard, she won't discover the misalignment until she's inside the commitment. And the room she has to correct it will be smaller than it was when she chose it. So, what I've learned, I want to bring it back to where I started, all three seats, from Aaron's seat. The obligation you're least prepared for is not the financial one. It's the one that arrives on a random Tuesday in year one, when the business is open and the work is real, and the version of ownership you imagined has been replaced by the version you're actually inside. When the gap between the projection and the reality is no longer abstract, it is the one that you're holding. And you are now managing your career and ownership, the full-time business and everything else that your life requires of you. And you're discovering in real time what you actually signed up for. That gap is the obligation. and it deserves to be examined before the signature, not discovered after it. From Allison's seat. I thought I was prepared. I had the numbers, I knew the plan. What I didn't know when I stepped into full time ownership was that you can execute the right plan correctly and consistently and still be months away from the return it projected. I had planned for the gap. I was smart enough to do that. I had not fully reckoned with what living inside the gap would feel like when the plan was working and the relief hadn't arrived yet. That distance between the plan being right and the plan feeling like progress is where the obligation lives. It's not in a spreadsheet, it's not in the accumulation of months. And I learned it after I was already in it. Lastly, from Renee's seed, disruption doesn't give you a clean slate, it compresses everything. The timeline shortens, the stakes don't. The obligation I carry from that seat, the one I bring to this show and to every conversation I have with someone from a disrupted position, is this: nobody should make a consequential decision from inside the urgency of the in between without having someone in the room who is not inside that urgency with them. Someone whose job is not to help them move forward, but whose job is to make sure they're looking at the full picture before they decide. That's not doubt, that's discipline. Now, every woman in this conversation is making a real decision. Erin is deciding whether to sign something that will change the shape of her financial and daily life for years. Allison is deciding whether to leave something that has organized her professional identity for a long time. Renee is deciding what to build next on ground she didn't choose to even be standing on. I don't take that lightly because I've made those decisions. I have felt the weight of those decisions. I've made some of them without looking at everything I should have looked at. And I've paid the cost of that in time and capacity and in the kind of hindsight that is only available from inside a commitment you can't easily unwind. That is why this show exists. Not to slow you down, not to make the decision feel heavier than it already is, to make sure the commitment you make holds the weight you're about to put on it. The obligation is real, and so is the weight. And the people who navigate ownership well, I have seen them. I have been in the room with them. They are not the people who went in without that weight. They are the people who have looked at it directly before they committed, who named it, who made the decision with all eyes on every piece of it. That is what clarity before commitment actually means. Not certainty, not absence of fear, the full picture before it's too late to adjust. There isn't a formal process for that. If you haven't found that out, I think you will. That's the gap that the work at Dear Monday Advisory exists to fill. Clarity before commitment. Before I go, I want to say something directly to wherever you are in this. If you're anywhere near one of these decisions, if you're an Aaron with a franchise packet in front of you, if you're Allison with a plan you've been revising for months, or Renee standing in the in between and feeling the pressure to move, This is the point where most people go forward without examining this layer. That is almost always when it gets expensive. We offer a decision exposure review. It's a 2-hour conversation, one session, designed to examine exactly what we've been talking about today, not the opportunity. We talk about the obligation, the full financial picture across the full commitment period, and the conditions that need to be true. The exposure that isn't in the documents, we map out the exposure. What the decision will require of your life between the commitment and the return on investment. This is the moment most people skip. And most people don't realize they've skipped it until they're already inside something they can't easily adjust. This is the work that determines whether your decision holds. If you are in that moment or approaching that kind of decision, I want to invite you to go to www.dearmonday.co before the commitment, when the thinking still belongs entirely to you. Last but not least, we've named the thing all three women share. Now we're going to go back to one of them. We're going to go back to Allison. She's been patient. Her patience has been real and it has been strategic. Remember, she has a plan, she has a timeline, she has conditions she is waiting to meet before she makes her move. But there is a version of strategic patience that becomes something else, something harder to see from the inside, where the conditions keep shifting, where almost ready becomes a permanent address, where the strategy of waiting starts to cost more than the risk of moving. That's episode 7. How do you know when you've waited too long? When does staying become the riskiest thing you can do? Allison is back, and she has a question she hasn't been able to answer. I'll see you then.